Most portfolios look approved, but very few would survive a restart. If you had to rebuild your portfolio from zero today, what would you still fund? And why is that uncomfortable? I'm Trevor Howes. I've spent the last 30 years watching what happens to decisions when approval meets reality. So approved isn't best, and this helps you understand why approved portfolios drift away from the best use of capital. This is not a scoring model. It's not a prioritization method. It's not a governance process. It's a pattern. Approval can create confidence in the moment. It can create fragility later. Here's what it looks like in real organizations. A set of initiatives gets approved. Funding is committed. The organization moves. Then a quarter later, sometimes two, pressure arrives. It's not always a crisis. Sometimes it's a budget squeeze. Sometimes it's a new priority. Sometimes it's a leadership change. And sometimes it's a question in an investment meeting. Why are we still funding this? And suddenly the answer isn't clear or confident. Portfolio reviews start to sound like debates, not decisions. Not because people don't care, because the portfolio can't be compared in a coherent way. The portfolio becomes crowded with work that is approved, but not easy to demonstrate that it's the best use of capital today. That's the symptom. Approval exists, funding continues, and yet the organization can't calmly explain why this is still the right allocation. When that discomfort shows up, three explanations appear. So misdiagnosis 1, we just need better reporting, better dashboards, one version of the truth. Misdiagnosis 2, this is a delivery problem. If delivery executed better, this would feel fine. Misdiagnosis 3, this is governance. We need stricter meetings, harder gates, more control. All three are tempting. All three can create activity, but none of them on their own solve the underlying problem. The portfolio isn't decision grade because value cases aren't comparable. Let's look at what gets missed. Approval creates a moment of confidence. It does not automatically create a durable basis for comparison. Most organizations build value cases as one-time information packs and narratives about what we meant to do. An initiative story. Initiative-specific assumptions, initiative-specific measures, initiative-specific baselines, and initiative-specific forecasts. Each one can sound reasonable in isolation. But when the portfolio needs to make trade-offs, when capital has to be defended, reshaped or reallocated, these narratives don't line up. So what happens? When comparability is weak, allocation decisions default to what is always available: politics, precedents, sunk cost pressure. Not because anyone is irrational, because without comparable evidence, the organization reaches for the only coherence it can find. One large program I was involved with kept going over many years and was so expensive it gained a mythical status as the thing that everything else depended on. Looking at its value beyond the original business case showed it needed to be stopped. The resources and saving it freed up then allowed the organization to make further savings without impacting value. Precedent says, we funded it last year. Politics say, this is strategically important. Sunk costs say, we've already spent too much to stop now. That's why portfolios can look stable on paper and unstable in reality. They look stable because approval happened. They become unstable because the basis for continued funding is not consistently comparable. And that's why the restart question is uncomfortable. It forces the portfolio to confront what it avoids. Not whether initiatives were approved, but whether they are still the best use of capital relative to everything else the organization could fund instead. The cost. Now, when this pattern holds, three things break at the portfolio level. First, continued decisions become rare and delayed, not because the organisation lacks courage, because it lacks the ability to compare value. Second, opportunity cost stays invisible. The best alternative is never confidently named. So continuation wins by default. Work stays funded because the alternatives for better use aren't explicit enough to displace it. Third, quality of returns degrade. Not because every initiative is bad, because capital spreads across work that stays funded, rather than concentrating behind the strongest comparable value cases. The portfolio becomes a set of defended initiatives rather than a disciplined allocation of scarce resource. And that creates a particular kind of fragility. Confidence becomes dependent on the narrative holding rather than the evidence staying coherent over time. That's the real risk. Not a bad project. A portfolio that can't calmly justify itself when reality changes. This video does not teach how to prioritize. It does not teach how to rank initiatives. It does not provide a business case template. It does not give steps, frameworks, or governance design. It's only naming a pattern that already exists. Why approved is not the same thing as best use of capital. So let's return to the restart question I asked at the start of this video. If you had to rebuild your portfolio from no projects today, knowing what you know now, what would still get funded? And here's the uncomfortable part. If that list is meaningfully different from what is funded today, the portfolio doesn't have a delivery problem first. It has a capital discipline problem. Approval created a moment of confidence, but it didn't create a portfolio that can stay coherent over time when trade-offs arrive. And when trade-offs arrive, quietly or suddenly, approved stops being an answer. And once you see that, another question appears. If approval doesn't guarantee best use of capital, why does work stay funded so easily? Why can organizations start initiatives quickly, but struggle to stop them, even when value becomes doubtful? Starting is celebrated. Stopping is different. Stopping requires something most portfolios don't preserve: comparable evidence. It requires trade-offs to be explicit. It requires someone to say, this is no longer the best use of capital. In the next video, we'll examine why stopping is structurally harder than starting, and why that lack of equality quietly dilutes return quality across the entire portfolio. Because if capital can't move, it accumulates. And accumulation is not a discipline.